So there's this book, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and it talks about, a lot of things obviously, but one of them is that if you spend 10,000 hours doing anything, that's how you become technically an expert at it and how you get good at something. Not just good. You're not very good, obviously, and then you get better, and then you get good, and then you get really good, and then you can do it in your sleep pretty much. Most people, obviously, it takes them years to get to that point. I think for me, probably the only thing I really have that with is writing. And it's the way I got there is, I think the reason that I was always sort of like called to do it or always had that desire and ambition is because I think I had in some way put in that time without really knowing it. And how it started was I just loved to read. So I just read voraciously. I read anything I could really get my hands on. It started out when I couldn't read independently on my own. My mom read to my sister, my brother, and I before bed, and I just enjoyed it and wanted to be read to all the time and go places where people were reading, like story hour at a library. Was really into it. And it didn't take long to, I guess, sort of follow along on my own, but then also to read on my own. I would write stories. I don't remember this, but I've heard, I guess I would draw a picture and then have sort of a caption and then tell the story. And then from there, I learned to write because I wanted to write these stories down. And I've been writing stories for probably as long as I can remember. And it started out writing by hand because they weren't long. I still sort of prefer to do that when it's an outline or something I'm trying to make sense of in my own head for myself, because, and I don't even, like, I would say this is my experience, like I can attest to this for a fact, but there's also research that supports it, that when you write something down by hand as opposed to typing it on a computer, it activates a different part of your brain and you just retain it differently. And I've found that that's like definitely my own experience. So I was always writing, but I was also reading. I read every night. Again, either I would get read to, or it got to a point where after we would all read together, I would read in my room before I fell asleep on my own. And I did this every night. And I did this up until I was probably in high school, I would say. Because then, I don't know, the work gets more challenging, you get kind of burnt out, whatever. But even before the age of 14, let's say, you add up all those hours, I think it probably is well over 10,000 hours. So I became really adept at, writing certainly, but also just knowing how a story should flow, because I had read so many. And I can recall being in school and having the lessons where spelling, and I could always spell, again, because I always saw it spelled out for me, so I knew how things should be properly spelled or words should just be put together. But the grammar and the parts of speech, I didn't necessarily understand what they were, and I really didn't care to. I just knew what worked and what didn't because I had seen it so many times. And it got very frustrating in a structured school setting because I couldn't tell you what made it work. I just knew if it did or didn't. I knew it if I saw it. Again, that wasn't something I could really articulate, so it wouldn't translate on standardized tests. So that was always sort of a source of tension, and I didn't enjoy grammar lessons. Even now, if you were to ask me about like a part of speech, I wouldn't know it from that. I would know it from the Schoolhouse Rock videos. So I guess I would say I came by that, not in a formal setting, but just doing my own thing because it appealed to me and it called to me, and that's what I like to do, and that's how I got to that point. And I sort of never stopped, because once I progressed in my, I guess, sort of school career and then my working for a living, I always came back to reading and writing because I enjoyed it so much. And there were times that it was more intermittent because I other issues I was sort of working through in regards to that, and wanting to be a writer, but having that fear of putting that out there into the world that I had to sort of work through. But once I was able to break through, I made both reading and writing just a regular part of my routine because I really enjoy it. So that's something that I love to do. And it's interesting because it's very easy for me to know if I'm not happy. Sometimes you're not happy and you just like don't really know why, or you just feel off and you don't know why. You don't even know that you're unhappy necessarily. For me, the biggest tell is if I'm not writing and I'm not spending free time reading. And if there's a writing project I'm working on and I have it on my computer and it's saved, and it'll tell you the last day that you opened it. If I haven't opened it for a while and then I go open it and I look at the date, I'm like, yup, there it is. I can connect it to something that went on that bothered me and affected my general mental outlook and state, and that's why I wasn't as happy and I didn't write. And I'm like, well, there you go, there it is. So that's how I guess got into it and got that level of experience to get onto the path that I was on and to continue it today. And I guess you could really apply that to anything. There are very few things that have really appealed to me in that way, but luckily writing was one of them, and I was able to find it when I was young and keep it. And I feel very blessed to have it because it's not, again, as much as I cherish the mind-body connection when I write it down and I write things down with my hand, you really don't have to have that to do it. I could deteriorate physically and still write. God forbid if I was in some sort of terrible accident or something like that and I didn't have the physicality to even type, I could still do voice dictation just in this day and age that we live in. So I feel very lucky that it turns out that this is what I love to do.